So one of the things that's become a big part of my practice over the past couple of years is the title of this talk. I'm thinking about the way that the structures that we create reflect parts of what makes us human, and what drives us as creative people. And when I say creative people, there I'm really not just talking about writers and designers and people who produce work. I'm also talking about all of the sort of the systemic people and infrastructure people, and network people as well, that support creative practice or work within creative practice in different ways. And the sort of the core of this idea came crystallized for me when I was reading a book by Linda Barry, who is an illustrator and a teacher in the US. And it's the book is basically a collection of her like kind of sketchbooks from her teaching practice, and there's a tiny little like sentence, maybe about a third of the way through, and she just writes down, story structure is about how people are, not about how stories are. And I think about that quote quite a lot, because I think when you're a writer, you sort of sometimes you fall back on those structural tools, like a 3-act structure, or a hero's journey, or a heroine's journey, or 4 acts, and forget that those rhythms and those shapes are driven by people and driven by kind of emotions and arcs that people reflect. They're not things that we sort of impose on the shape of work. They're things that emerge from what the work is supposed to do. And yeah, so I think a lot about the idea that people make things. I don't think that's a controversial statement to make. A person makes a thing, and people make multiple things along the way. And in making that, sometimes they're conscious about what they're doing. Sometimes you'll be able to step back and go, okay, I know that I need a character that serves this function in the story, or I need, this plot point to happen, or you're trying to figure out what the emotional beat is next, and how you maybe get your protagonist or your antagonist or your other characters to get there. But also, people make things unconsciously. So inside of you have all these kind of things that you know about yourself and things that you don't know about yourself. And as you're making work, and as you're writing, or you're making a game, those unconscious things are also informing the practice that you make. So every decision that you're sort of making about, the shape of a thing, or the color of a thing, or the words to use, or how a character speaks, they are informed by what you know about the work and what you know about yourself, but also informed by what you don't know about the work, and also what you don't know about yourself along the way as well. And so your knowledge of what you're making is always going to be incomplete, basically. And that's why we have things like, prototyping and drafting and hacking and sketching and workshopping, because as we're producing work, as we're trying things out, as we're doing experiments, we're trying to understand the work that we make as we make it. And we're asking questions about it, and we're asking questions of ourselves, and we're trying to connect the conscious knowledge that we have of how to make work, and how to achieve certain effects, with our sort of unconscious desires along the way as well. And that sort of extends out. So we're sort of starting from, a person with, a whole bunch of emotions and a whole bunch of feelings and a whole bunch of thoughts and a whole bunch of skills. And then we're maybe connecting to a slightly larger network of people and practice, but also medium. But as work goes out into the world, you sort of realize that the knowledge of the reception of your work is incomplete as well, because cultures and groups and audiences have their own sets of values and their own sets of responses as the makers. So all of these things, your values, your unconscious knowledge, your conscious knowledge, exists in this giant network of practice, effectively. And you can know bits of it, and you can sort of lean on received wisdom or lean on your own experiences, but there also is a huge amount of unknown knowledge, just as there's a huge amount of known knowledge of yourself as a person that you're sort of uncovering as you make things. And that's largely about, making meaning together, producing particular types of meaning through particular types of work or of medium or experience. That's what you're doing, and the end result of that meaning is sort of unpredictable and chaotic, and unknowable. Because if we knew at the start exactly how our work was going to be received and exactly what it was going to do, what would be the point of making that work, right? And if we knew how we as makers were going to change by making that work, we would just have changed, right? Like, we wouldn't actually have to go through the long drawn out process of doing that, and the dynamics of the production of the work. So let's take a step back a little bit, actually. So if we sort of think about like the idea that people make things, and those things, go out into the world, that pretty clearly tells us that people have relationships. They have relationships with other people. And ultimately, when you're an individual, there are people that you like, and there are people that you don't like, in different levels and for very different ways. There are also things that you like, and things that you dislike, or things that you have complex relationships with, and people you have complex relationships with, and work that you have complex relationship with. I don't think that's a super controversial statement to make. And those relationships exist in very networked and complex ways, along sort of multiple axes of liking and disliking a thing. You might really like a thing that a person has done, a piece of work that a person has made, but not really like how they've made it, or not really like some decisions they've maybe made in their personal life. And the same for all your personal relationships as well. You're always sort of negotiating, in what way am I like this person, or do I like this person? Do I have a positive relationship with? But also things that you don't like. You're able to say, I'm not like that person in these ways. That person doesn't reflect my values. And as a person, you exist within a network of likes and dislikes, and people that you want to be like and people that you don't want to be like, as well. And it can be, one of the really useful things it can be to do is to identify, like, not just mentors, like people that you want to be like, but also like effectively like dark mentors or anti-mentors, like people who you're like, I never want to be like that person at all. I'm gonna like move in a completely opposite direction, or I'm gonna like set out to fight that person because I think their values are so awful, or so terrible. And those sorts of likes and dislikes extend to objects and to work as well. People like work in similar ways to how they like people. And there's a really interesting quote from Jean Baudrillard in A System of Objects, where he talks about that is why everything that cannot be invested in human relationships is invested in objects. And as makers of work, we need to think about how the work that we make captures like something human, but also something of the object, because we're trying to produce something, truthful or honest, that reflects some aspect of the human experience. But at the same time, we're choosing particular mediums that have particular affordances, that have particular structures that are unique to them. A story in a novel is different from a story in a video game, is different from the story that a piece of visual art might tell. And together, that personal expression, that human experience, that relationship to object, to artifact, is an interesting conversation, and is an interesting relationship to think about, how, and as a human and object relationship as well, because investing in an object is different from investing in a person, and you can like an object in a different way than you can like a person. And that applies to larger structures as well. And this is where it starts to kind of look back into where my practice has really evolved over the past couple of years, starting to think about systems and structures and what I sort of talk about as cultural infrastructure, things that support the production of work, but don't actually produce necessarily work on their own. Thinking about the structures and the systems that enable people to produce work, or support people in a production of different types of work, or introduce people into making work. I'm talking about sort of galleries and festivals and cultural institutions, but also smaller structures, like workshopping groups, or mentors, or peer mentoring structures as well. And a lot of my thinking now, and has been for a while, is about how do we take that idea of a structure, like story structure being about people, not about how that structure is, and apply it to the creation of these larger support structures, these larger pieces of cultural infrastructure, and how we might take a step back and identify what are the human values of these things, what are the human values of a gallery, or a curator, or a cultural institution, or a funding system. What are they trying to do as tools? How do they reflect the type of work that people want to do, or the type of thoughts that people want to have? And I think as a really tangible, sort of intangible example, an event like this one, and the work that Christie's done, it clearly represents like some aspect of Christie's view of what creative practice is and how creative practice functions. And she's designed a format that tells that story, but not just tells it, but amplifies it as well. And then she brings in people who share similar values to her and similar worldviews with her, not completely, because everyone is different and everyone has different sort of industrial or cultural or creative experience. But in doing so, she's sort of constructed a system, a network, a piece of infrastructure that functions like a tool that is designed to change the world effectively, to sort of leverage the knowledge and leverage the understanding, and then amplify that through the structure and through the rules and the network that she's built. And I think about the way that all of the structures that we talk about, and the way that we think about it, like I've said, like galleries and festivals and expos and conferences, when someone sits down to put one of those together, or to build one, they're doing it from an individual perspective. They're sort of going, well, I think this thing needs to exist to do this thing. And that thing that they want to do is always human, ultimately. It's always about, well, maybe we need to get more people together to share their practice, or maybe we need to get investors in a room with producers, or maybe we want to have a complex conversation about how this work might be art, or maybe we want to create an institutional memory that can last for hundreds of years, that lets us share work beyond our tiny little blip of human existence. And that's ultimately, and even at smaller levels, like when we form a writers group, or when we take our game to like a meetup that lets us share it, it's about, we're trying to cultivate something that reflects who we are, and that reflects what we like. We're trying to build social situations and networks that are reflective of how we believe the world should be as people. Even if sometimes we don't fully understand what that means when we're doing it. To sort of use another example, like I ran a festival for 4 years at Melbourne called Free Play, and I'm still thinking about what it means for me as an individual to have produced that, and what questions it was asking, and what impact that it had on me personally, and where I was at in my life when I was doing that project, as well, and what the output of that was, and how that told a particular story, what I believed was important to be told. And that's really what I sort of encourage people to constantly interrogate about themselves, whether, no matter what type of creative practitioner they are, is to take a step back and go, how does the work that I'm making, whether or not it's a novel or a game, or a film or a piece of visual art, how does it embody what I care about? How does it embody the things that I like about the world? How is it human? While at the same time responding to what the thing is, what the object is, and what the material is, and how those things are in dialogue, and how those things uncover, and how the process and the dynamic of making that work tells you something about yourself, and tells you something about what the world is, and how you are in the world, and what your relationships are to other people and other creative practice, ultimately. And that's my thoughts, and that's my talk.
That's great. Thank you very much. One of the things you're talking about at the beginning, when you're talking about you're not if you knew the outcome, like and the process and all that sort of stuff, you wouldn't bother doing it. Like, there's discovery, there's things that you're figuring out as you're actually going, so it's not was it coloring by numbers sort of things? Like, there's something we're getting from the act of creation. Which is I mean, I think that question of create, like, an individual creative practice, is also a process of producing work. Like, because everyone's individual creative practice is different, it's like being able to make work and identify, like, a process for making that work that works for you, and sort of reflecting on both of those things, and interrogating. When we form a writers group, or when we form, like, a critique group for our work, that same process, that same reflective process, can be applied to the process of making the work as well. It's like taking a step back and going, well, has that worked? Has that not worked? What can I learn from other people? And I think, it's sort of, I think that process is really important, to always be thinking about, like, how can you reflect on each stage and each part of the structure, like, as you go. And the structures that you have around you. I remember I had an epiphany when I was working on my PhD, that the process is, you go to conferences, you share your thoughts and ideas and your arguments, that helps develop your argument, and you go back and reintegrate them. And then I realized, I could just be told lots of different things in different places. That in actual fact, it's best for me to curate. It's sort of that garbage in, garbage out sort of stuff. It's like, oh, maybe I could be going to be careful about what I feed myself. And I'm a lot more like that now in terms of the networks, the conversations that I hear around me, the creative projects that people share, the influences, the thoughts they have, and then, as you also mentioned, the choice of media, your choice of art form, that all influences it.
I mean, I think we when we talk specifically about a person's relationship to work, we sort of have this idea of taste, but I think, like, taste also applies to exactly what you're identifying, like the people around you and the things that you let in, and I think that's where it starts to bleed into that idea of, like, who am I like, who am I not like. You're cultivating those individual relationships, or those individual values, and not even, like, just, like, picking, like, an entire person to be like, I'm definitely like that person, but just picking parts of people in a network, and also meeting a lot of people. I think it can be quite important, just to get a sense of, okay, I'm sort of like this person in this way, and I'm sort of not really like this person in this way. Well, that person's where I want to be, but I'm not sure that I'm the same as them in a particular way. And, like, cultivate that taste of people, and that taste of relationships, as well. And again, that extends out to like events and conferences that you go to as well. Like, which ones speak to me, as well. Like, I think it's that scale of that kind of fractal nature of these ideas. Like, you're a person with values, and everything else has its values as well. They become more diffuse the bigger the scale gets, but you're still kind of able to go, maybe this event isn't for me, or maybe this space isn't for me, or maybe this conversation isn't for me. So I'll find somewhere else, or I'll build a completely new one.
So what would you recommend as
as an activity, as a task for us now?
So almost exactly that. You know, get a piece of paper, draw a little circle, put yourself in the middle, and really think about like the people that you've met, or the people that you know of, not even the people that you've met, and the values that they embody, and how much you think you're like them, or how much you want to be like them. And then think about like who are maybe the people who are connected to them or inform them, and to not just do it in a positive vector, but also in like identify the people that you don't want to be like, or identify the things that you don't want to be like, and sort of map out that network of values with yourself in the middle, and identify those relationships, and use that to really figure out who you are and the type of work that you want to make, but also the practice that you want to embody as well, and just like figure out your space within that network of relationships.